Tonight I'm going to talk about menticide, and I'll start by telling you one of the problems in talking about a theory. One of the most difficult tasks of a black scholar, one of the most difficult tasks of a black person who thinks, is to be able to analyze the influence of racism or racist on black behavior and attitudes, be able to do that analyzation, and at the same time escape the almost irresistible Western scholarship protected barrier. Western scholarship in the Western world, that is their protection. They have a barrier, and they call it scholarship. And it protects them so well that even when you begin to study racism, you end back up studying the victim, doing an analysis of their victims. That's what is happening. So there's no question that this analysis of the victim methodology has been a major scientific development of white scientists because it effectively leads away from the cause of our condition, which is white pathology.
Stop it right there. As we always talk about, white supremacy, racism is the root of all of our issues. But I like how he starts off talking about analyzing the effects of white racism on black behaviors. Things that we've talked about extensively in the past, but we'll reiterate. The Negro mindset, how we behave towards each other and how we behave towards other groups, especially white people. How we interact with white people, how we see ourselves around white people, how we even switch up the way we talk when white people come around. So that's a direct effect of the white supremacy that we've experienced these past like 500 plus years. The inferiority complex. It's what I was reading on Monday when I was reading from Dr. Naeem Akbar's book. Make sure y'all go check out those videos because Dr. Akbar dropping major gems on y'all. But looking at the actual psychological effects of slavery, of not just slavery, but the white supremacy racism that has followed slavery, because it's a collective of all of that has happened to black people, really critically analyzing our behaviors, our thoughts, just how we interact with ourselves and others, how we interact with the individual, how we interact with the group, how we interact with other groups of people. And we can see that something's wrong. And that's why I love about these breakdowns and especially what Dr. Bobby Wright is talking about. He's labeling it menticide, but it's PTSS. If you want to call it post-traumatic slave syndrome, it's the same thing. It's the actual psychological or even the physiological, if you want to add in the epigenetic effects of things that have happened to us over the centuries.
You know, another thing too is, and I like you said, the way he started off with his intro, is the cleverness. It's very clever of white philosophers and educators and the people that provide pretty much all of their intellectual data, or intellectual, the collectiveness of their intellectual leaders. They always start off talking about like you said, the effects of white supremacy on the subsets of people who it encounters, who it affects. They never examine the construct of white supremacy itself.
You have to.
Right. And see, that's where, as Black scholars, sometimes we drop the ball because, like you said, we focus a lot on the effects, and we do need to focus on the effects in terms of how it affects us as Black people.
But you got to look at both sides, like you're saying, though.
Right, because there's the cause. See, we're dealing with the symptoms. And, you never quite heal from dealing with the symptoms. You can just suppress the symptoms. You can suppress a cough, you can suppress a sneeze, you can suppress a fever, but what's causing the fever? And that's the whole system, program, dynamics of white supremacy, as we know it.
The root.
And I think he breaks that. I think the way he starts that is quite genius in terms of being able to take an analytical effect of, to actually look at the cause and effect of being under white domination.
But like you said, what is very important, in addition to understanding what happened to us, we have to study white supremacy. And we have to study white supremacy in its totality. So we can, and I think we need to study it historically and study it actively now and what it's doing now, and see how white supremacy started and how it has evolved and lasted over the centuries. Because there's a reason why it's lasted.
You
There's a reason why
know,
it lasted this long.
oh, and you know the funny part, right? Because, and I have often gotten into this with a lot of brothers and sisters who have been like, so a lot of brothers and sisters who they've been born into this struggle. They've been born into this movement of anti black racism, fighting it from the time they've been the time they could walk and talk to up into these points. And I feel like sometimes that puts them in a disadvantaged place because they never really get a chance to study it from the outside looking in. That was one of the differences between me and most of the people that identify with this, because I got 2 degrees in history, right? I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in history. But the one thing I realized in studying history is I recognized the missing pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
And when I started to analyze those dynamics, it spoke to the fact that it spoke to the origins of racism, white supremacy from their perspective, not from our perspective, but from their perspective. And studying history through studying world history, studying American history, studying modern European thought and society, studying the Civil War, both the antebellum and Reconstruction eras, studying all those different things, and then seeing the world through their lens helped me to understand how they operated and helped me to understand what made them tick. And I think that's a very important factor.
Yes. Last thing I want to say on this. So shout out to and rest in peace to one of my college professors, Dr. K.K. Cambone, Dr. Colby Cambone, giant in the black psychology field. He made sure that he taught us white psychology and he taught us black psychology. He juxtaposed them together because he wanted us to see the stark difference between how white people view us and classify us psychologically and how we should view ourselves and classify ourselves psychologically, right? So that was excellent for a student like me, for someone like me to be able to see it right here in my face, how white people have used, especially social sciences, to advance white supremacy over the years and how they used us as test dummies and things. But also talking about studying the history of white people and white supremacy. And so I just use like the idea and the image and the thought process and everything created around Dracula. Right? So going back to who Dracula was, Dragul.
Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad Dragul, the son of the dragon. His father was Dragula, the dragon, and Vlad Dragul, the son of the dragon, and a bloodthirsty man who was also known as Vlad the Impaler. So the concept of Dracula is built off this man because Vlad's he was literally bloodthirsty. His whole thing of intimidation and domination was, I'm impaling people, I'm bathing in their blood, I'm taking their entrails out. I probably eat some of their entrails, some of their intestines, some of their organs.
Well, no, probably.
Right. So it's the lust for blood, and that was taken and made into the Dracula character. It's based off something real. And so you won't know that until you study that part of European history. But think about the psychology of the people who come from this culture.
You know what? You know, it's funny you say that, right? Because I taught a class called The Art of Film. And through that, you had to learn, about, I had to teach about different lores and where they came from. And, especially when you talk about like the fairy tales and the Grimm stories, the story from the Brothers Grimm, all those stories, all those things were based in real things. They weren't even called bedtime stories. They were called cautionary tales because in the woods, you would have men who grew long hair and were animal-like and cannibal-like. So they would call them werewolves. And that's where the werewolf lore came from. And you talk about Dracula, but there's also another part of the vampire lore that comes from taking the blood of virgins And really what it meant was
Bloody Mary.
right. And but they would take the blood from children. And they even, there's even conversations about that happening now. I'm not going to get into those conspiracies, but there's even conversations that are happening now. But that all those lores were tied in, even Frankenstein, right? I'm not going to tell the story about Benjamin Franklin again, because people start asking questions, and it's like, after a while, Google hides things. So, but yeah, like you said before, man, when you learn about their history, and it's fascinating to see how their mind works, but it also gives you insight in terms of how they view us and why they practice the system of white supremacy the way they do.
How a person or how a group of people views you determines how they treat you.
Exactly.
Let's go.
It leads you away from that once you get into it, because the way the scholarship is set up. One of the results is that the position is usually taken that one should not even imply to the black masses our truly weak position for fear of immobilizing them. In other words, you shouldn't talk about all the conditions of blacks because you immobilize them, which are a condition which already exists. While others take the position that whites have power over blacks all. Now this is due to the all-powerful but non-existent white concept of free will. Free will, which has us in all sort of trouble. All sort of trouble, this idea that you got free will. Namely that people always have choices, and you have choices since you have free will. Therefore, you can be held responsible for your behavior. And that free will, of course, as I spoke to last night, that free will, what it leads to then, it leads to a great deal of negative behavior. And it leads to rugged individualism. Therefore,
So when you get a chance to make decisions on your own, you make a lot of selfish decisions that don't help the group, and that usually come from you not understanding the concept of what's going on. I was listening to, I was listening to Neely Fuller earlier, and Neely Fuller was talking about whether you want to be a part of it or not, whether you like it or not, whether every interaction you have with white people is favorable or not. We're still at war. We're still at war. We're at war because it's their job to maintain their dominance, and it's our job to overthrow their dominance. They know that. Too many of us don't know that, right? And so because they know that, they're in a constant state of prevention. I'll say that. They're in a constant state of preventing any black people from recognizing who they are and rising in significant numbers. It's okay. It's okay for stuff like this to happen. In case you all actually decide to take us serious and want to actually mobilize and unite and organize. Now, if y'all don't actually want to take us serious, then we just talking and we're not a threat. But if y'all actually take us serious, now we got something. Now we got something. And see, that's what they don't want to happen. Those are the things that they try to quell. Those are the things that those are the people that they normally go after. I just got a question. When the last time they really had to take a black person, like really had to take a black person? I ain't really talking about like being banned off social media, and no shade to nobody. I ain't throwing shots at nobody, but I'm not talking about like being banned off of social media. But when the last time they actually had to just like try to disable somebody from their assets in their life because they saw that person as a threat?
I can say some things, but I don't want hate mail coming to your channel. But a few brothers that they've launched smear campaigns towards judicial foundries and ended up in prison. I'm not going to say too many names, but going back to that first part, where you talk about the rugged individualism, it's funny because I'm listening to this book right now by Tommy J. Curry, right? Dr. Tommy J. Curry, The Man Not. And one of the things that Tommy spoke to early on in the book was the fact that, you know, Black people were considered agender, like genderless, in regards to, in the eyes of white supremacy, understanding the whole nature of patriarchy, and that feminism is the bookend to white male patriarchy for total white domination. In other words, white women didn't want to dismantle patriarchy; they just wanted a fair and equal control in white male patriarchy, specifically over Black men. And one of the things that was determined was that in order to succeed, it had to remove the masculine nature of Black people or any dominated people. So the whole community, whether you're Black, whether you're Native American, whether you were Asian, whatever, you come in touch with the so-called dominant European culture, from whence they created the white community and so forth, the white race. Then they automatically, you know, sodomize the males, in so many words, either literally or theoretically, and castrated them so that they then would take on feminine roles in the world. Now, why do I bring that up? It's because when you talk about the rugged individualism, it's talking about giving the Black community the privilege of women who are under the domination of the so-called man, which is the white man in this particular culture. And when you analyze that, that means that the white community takes on a parental role in regards to the Black community in this particular country, under the guise of white supremacy. And therefore, when you give, it's like, it's not choices, it's the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
It's rugged individualism.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say you got a choice between 3 jobs. But if you really had freedom of choice and you had free will, then you wouldn't just be limited to 3 jobs. It's like the voting. You have two political parties or 2 or 3 different candidates. That's not choice.
Right.
It's the illusion of choice.
What's crazy about that is you actually have more than one choice, but you have the illusion of 2 choices. So you limit yourself to 2 choices because that's what you've been sold.
Right. So, you know, and so the bottom line is, as a parent, you often hear this particular phrase, do as I say and not as I do.
Which is wrong.
Because they have stripped us of cultural identity, they've stripped us of, they've done what they created the Black codes to remove us from a codified community between slave codes and Black codes, so that we would be removed from being codified and things of that nature. They don't practice rugged individualism. They practice group economics. They practice group politics. They practice group social norms. They practice and move in her. And specifically, they will, within an arena, go for each other, come at each other. They might even hate each other and kill each other. But when it comes down to protecting the sanctuary of white supremacy, they lock arms. They have a unified front. So that's not practicing rugged individualism. That's understanding cultural integrity and the importance of protecting their culture.